We don't always know the hidden story behind an abandoned house. Sometimes we only see it from a distance. Silent. Covered in dust. As if nothing had ever happened there. But all it takes is for someone to dare to ask. To discover that not all walls keep quiet. Some of them still whisper. This story begins like that. With a house everyone in town avoided. Even though no one dared to say why. I heard the rumors since I was a child. But it wasn't until recently that someone told me what really happened. And let me warn you. If you choose to stay, what you're about to hear isn't just a legend. It's a chain of events that marked an entire family. And that still remain alive inside that house. Even though no one lives there anymore. They say it all started back in '93. When a family arrived from far away looking for a fresh start. The father, a serious, hard-working man, wanted to take his family away from the city. The mother, quiet, with a smile that seemed to hide exhaustion, agreed to move to start over. And the two children, happy to finally have a big yard, had no idea that decision would change everything. The house sat in the middle of the countryside, surrounded by trees, far from the noise. It had a long hallway, a small barn, and an old well covered by a wooden lid. Nothing strange. Nothing out of the ordinary. Until the family began to notice small things. Details that seemed insignificant at first. The mother said she heard footsteps in the hallway when she was alone. At first she thought it was the wind. Or maybe an animal. But the footsteps were slow. Firm. As if someone were walking without any hurry. And the worst part was that they always stopped right in front of the children's bedroom door. The father didn't believe in such things. He said an old house would always make noises. But that didn't explain why sometimes. In the middle of the night. Someone knocked on the door 3 times. Never more than 3. Never less. And when he opened it, no one was there. Just the empty hallway. Dark. As if the house itself were holding its breath. The children began to change too. The older one, once cheerful, stopped playing outside. He said he didn't like the shadow that lived near the barn. One time the mother heard him crying because he said that shadow called him by his name. And the most chilling part was that he always described it the same way. It's big. It has no face. And it's waiting for me to be alone. The younger one, the little girl, had strange dreams. She dreamed that someone sat on her bed and watched her. Didn't speak. Didn't move. Just breathed. A slow, deep, heavy breathing. So heavy she woke up drenched in sweat. Trembling. She said that breathing came from the well in the yard. The mother started to worry. She tried talking to the father. But he insisted it was stress from the move. Until one night he heard something himself. And from that moment on he stopped joking about his family's fears. It was a cold night. Almost no moon. The father walked into the hallway because he heard someone walking outside the house. He thought it was an animal. But when he opened the door, he saw a figure standing next to the well. It had no clear shape. It was like a silhouette made of darkness. And the most disturbing part was that it seemed to be looking at the house. At him. The figure didn't move. Didn't step back. It simply watched him. As if it had been waiting. He blinked. And the figure vanished. Just like that. As if it had never been there. But that was the beginning of the real terror. Things escalated. Doors closed on their own. Glasses fell without explanation. Plates were found shattered in the morning. And the nights grew heavier. The shadow didn't just walk anymore. Now it breathed inside the house. Sometimes in the kitchen. Sometimes in the hallway. And once, the mother swore she heard it right behind her. As if someone were only inches from her neck. The family began to get sick. Constant headaches. Fever. Nightmares. And the atmosphere in the house became unbearable. The mother said she sometimes felt like someone was watching her from the corners. And the older boy no longer slept. He stayed awake all night, staring at the door, waiting for something to come in. The father finally called a friend of his, an older man who had known the area since he was young. He was the one who revealed something no one else dared to say. You shouldn't have opened the well. You shouldn't have moved the lid. That was closed for a reason. The mother froze. The older boy started crying. And the little girl, not understanding, walked up to the man and asked what lived there. The man looked at her with compassion. And simply said, something that shouldn't have a name. Something that doesn't want this house to be at peace again. From that moment on, the family tried to leave. But before they could, something happened that sealed their fate. One night, the mother woke to the sound of her son crying. She ran to his room. The window was open, even though she had closed it before going to sleep. The boy trembled, saying the shadow had entered, that it sat on his bed, and whispered something in his ear. The mother held him. But as she comforted him, she felt something behind her. A tall, cold, inhuman presence. And then she heard it. That same sound that had haunted her dreams. A slow breathing. That belonged to no one in her family. That was the last night they ever spent in that house. But the story doesn't end there. Because what happened afterward? What happened at the funeral? Is the reason this story is still told today. And let me warn you. It isn't easy to hear. They left the house before sunrise. They didn't take much. Just clothes. A few documents. And the memories that hadn't yet been contaminated by fear. The father didn't say a single word the entire way. The mother stared out the window. Her eyes red. Holding the children close. And the two little ones, confused, felt that something from that house had come with them. Stuck to their skin. Like a coldness the sun couldn't remove. They stayed for a while at some relative's house. In a nearby town. At first they thought everything had been left behind. That the noises, the shadows, the heavy breathing, had remained trapped within those damp walls. But fear, once you open the door for it, doesn't always stay where it was born. Sometimes it follows people. The mother was the first to notice something wasn't right. The nightmares continued. She dreamed of the well. Of the wooden lid slightly open. And of something that from the bottom stared up at her. As if the black water had eyes. The older boy spoke less every day. He didn't want to eat anymore. He spent hours staring at a fixed point on the wall. And when they asked him what he was looking at, he only answered, "He's here. But you don't want to accept it." The little girl began sleeping with the light on. She was terrified to close her eyes. Because every time she did, she felt the bed sink at her feet. As if someone sat there. One night the mother entered her room. And found her awake. Stiff. Staring at the ceiling. "Can't you sleep?" she asked softly. The girl took a while to respond. When she finally spoke, she whispered something that froze her mother's blood. "It's just that if I close my eyes, the breathing gets closer." A few days later, the father began to get sick. A strange exhaustion followed him everywhere. The doctors told him it had to be stress. Burnout. But he knew it was something else. Every night, when the rest of the family finally managed to sleep, he stayed awake listening. The silence of the house. The creaking wood. And something that didn't belong there. One early morning, he got up to go to the kitchen. As he walked past the hallway mirror, he noticed something strange. In the reflection he could see his face. Tired. Aged. But behind him, in the darkness of the hallway, there was a black silhouette. Tall. Taller than him. He turned around immediately. No one was there. When he looked back at the mirror, the silhouette was still there. Closer. That same week he decided to return to the house in the countryside. Not to live there. Just to settle things properly. As he said. No one in the family agreed. But he insisted. He said that if they left things unfinished, that thing would never leave them alone. He went alone. On a cloudy afternoon. The trees looked taller. The road. Longer. The house was exactly as they had left it. Closed doors. Dirty windows. The well in the same place. Silent. The man went inside. The air smelled of humidity. Of soil. Of something else. He approached the children's room. The bed was unmade. The curtains still. Only one detail made him stop. On the pillow. The shape of a head was still there. As if someone had gotten up from it just moments before. The father swallowed hard. He felt the urge to run. But his pride and fear mixed together. He decided to go straight to the yard. To the well. When he lifted the wooden lid, the air changed. A sour, old smell hit his face. He looked down. He didn't see water. Only darkness. A darkness so dense it seemed to have weight. No one knows exactly what happened there. All that's known is that the neighbors heard a scream. A single scream. Long. Torn. And then nothing. The next day they found his body near the well. His face turned upward. His eyes open. As if he had seen something right before dying. There were no marks. No wounds. The doctors said it was a heart attack. Sudden death. But those who saw him up close swore his expression showed more than pain. It showed a mixture of terror and surprise. The funeral was held at the house in town. Family from far away came. Neighbors. Acquaintances. The room where they placed the coffin was small. With a window facing the street. They lit several candles. Placed chairs on each side. And the atmosphere filled with murmurs. Sighs. Prayers whispered under trembling breaths. The mother was devastated. She sat near the coffin, holding her children's hands, trying to stay standing only for them. The older boy didn't move. He stared fixedly at his father's face, as if he were waiting for him to open his eyes at any moment. The little girl, confused, only knew that something very bad had happened. But she still couldn't grasp the magnitude of the loss. The night went on. Some relatives fell asleep on the chairs. Others stepped out to the patio to smoke. To cry alone. The air inside the house grew heavy. There was a strange silence. As if the funeral itself were being watched from somewhere no one could see. Close to midnight. The first thing happened. One of the candles, the one right at the foot of the coffin, went out suddenly. No one was near it. No windows were open. The mother stood up to relight it. But when she approached, she felt her skin prickle. There, right next to the base of the coffin, the floor was ice cold, as if a block of frozen air were hidden beneath the tiles. She lit the candle, tried to calm herself, told herself it was just nerves, nothing more. However, the older boy remained still, his eyes fixed on his father's face. The mother called his name. Once. Twice. The boy took a long moment to react. And when he finally turned his head, his eyes were glassy. And he said something she would never forget. "Mom. He's not coming alone." From that moment on, the atmosphere changed. Someone said they felt the floor tremble slightly, like a faint quake. The candle flames began to stretch upward. They didn't go out. They just elongated. Too much. As if something were pulling them. An aunt who was praying the rosary began stumbling over the words. Not because she was tired, but because she couldn't pronounce certain names. It was as if her tongue refused to say them. A cousin who had stepped out to get some air came back pale. He said that in the window facing the street, he had seen the silhouette of a man standing behind the glass. The strange part was that everyone was inside. No one was outside at that moment. The funeral, which at first was only sadness, began to fill with a feeling hard to explain. A mixture of fear, discomfort, and the certainty that something else was there with them. The mother felt the urge to get close to the coffin again. She leaned over her husband's face, whispered a prayer, and then she heard it, right beside her ear, as if someone were breathing right behind her. That sound, deep, slow, heavy, the same breathing she had heard in the house in the countryside. The same one. She froze. She couldn't turn her head. She couldn't scream. She only looked at the motionless face of the man she had loved. And behind her, that breathing continued, as if something had found her again. Even though they were far from the house, far from the well. When she finally managed to move, she spun around. No one was there. Just the room, the chairs, the relatives. And yet, she was certain something had brushed her back. Something cold. Like a hand that didn't want to let her go. She said nothing. She stayed silent. But her eyes changed from that night on. Because she understood her husband's death hadn't closed anything. It had only opened a different door. After 3 a.m, when nearly everyone was nodding off, the older boy stood up without anyone noticing. He walked to the coffin. Silently. Stopped right at the height of his father's chest. And placed both hands on the wood. As if trying to feel something on the other side. The mother saw him. She rose quickly. She was about to tell him to step back. That it wasn't the moment. But before she could speak, the boy whispered softly, "Mom. Come closer. He wants to tell you something." The phrase hit the room like a bucket of ice water. Some woke up. Others crossed themselves. The mother felt her legs tremble. Even so, she approached. She placed her hand on the coffin, next to her son's. In that instant, everyone heard the same sound. A single thud. From inside. As if something, or someone, had tapped the wood from the other side. Some people screamed. An aunt fainted. The candles flickered all at once. The boy didn't move. He kept his hand on the coffin. Eyes closed. The knock inside the coffin left everyone frozen. The silence that followed was so deep that even the candles seemed to hold their flame still. No one wanted to move. No one wanted to be the first to admit what they had heard. But the boy, with his hand still on the wood, slowly opened his eyes. His expression wasn't fear. It was something worse. A mix of sadness and acceptance. As if he understood something the others still refused to see. The mother grabbed him by the arm. "Son, what are you doing?" He turned his head toward her. Slowly. And with a thin, trembling voice. He said, "It wasn't Dad." The entire room shuddered. A woman started praying. Another relative whispered that maybe they should put the candles out. That maybe it was a bad sign. But the boy shook his head. As if he knew exactly where that knock had come from. "It wasn't Dad," he repeated. Then, "Who was it?" asked a cousin. Trembling. The boy lowered his gaze. And pointed toward the corner where the wall cast a shadow. No one wanted to look. But slowly, one by one, they all did. In that corner, where the light barely touched, something was forming. A shape. Still. Tall. It wasn't a person. It wasn't an object. It was like a presence. Something standing upright without having a body. The candles began to make a strange sound. A soft crackling. The flame stretched upward again. They didn't go out. They were being pulled. And suddenly, the air turned colder. So cold. Everyone could see their own breath as they exhaled. The mother took a step back. The children clung to her. Someone asked if they should call a pastor. A priest. Anyone. But before anyone could decide, the silhouette moved. It didn't walk. It didn't advance. It simply changed position. As if the space between the corner and the coffin had vanished. 1 second it was in the shadow. The next, it was right behind the coffin. The mother screamed. Several chairs fell to the floor. One of the candles went out. The older boy ran to his mother, wrapping his arms around her. The coffin sounded again. A slow tapping. Repeated. Not loud. Not desperate. Just insistent. As if something inside wanted attention. The mother couldn't take it anymore. She covered her children with her arms. And through sobs, she said, "Please. Please. Leave us alone." At that moment, the window opened by itself. With a bang. The wind burst inside. All the flames went out at the same time. And the room was left in complete darkness. Only breathing could be heard. And something else. A breathing. Deep. Slow. Heavy. The same one. The breathing moved. Came in through the window. Circled the coffin. Passed between the people. And stopped right behind the mother. She felt it. A coldness climbing up her back. A murmur so faint it was impossible to know if it was real. Or only inside her mind. When the light returned, thanks to a relative lighting a tiny flame, the silhouette was gone. But something had changed. The coffin's position. It had shifted slightly. Not much. Only a few centimeters. But everyone noticed. Everyone knew no one had touched it. The mother stood up as best she could. Grabbed her children. And walked out of the room. She didn't care if anyone followed. She just wanted to get away. Breathe. Escape that presence that seemed to be keeping vigil with them. In the hallway. The air was warm. Normal. But the children were still clinging to her. Trembling. The older boy murmured. He didn't let him come alone. The little girl asked. Who didn't let who? The older boy replied. Without looking at anyone. The one that lives in the well. The mother felt her legs almost give out. She knew the nightmare wasn't over. And that whatever had happened in the house had followed them here. Maybe since the first day. Maybe even before. The other relatives were arguing inside. Some said the wake should stop. Others wanted to finish quickly. Out of respect. And others swore that what they saw couldn't have been human. An uncle walked up to the mother. Told her she needed to rest. That the kids were terrified. But when he tried to take them to another room, the girl screamed. I don't want to go in there. The uncle froze. Surprised. Why not? She pointed toward the dark hallway. Because he's there. At that exact moment. A sound echoed through the house. It wasn't a knock. It wasn't a voice. It was like a massive hand dragging something across the floor. From the living room to the door of the room where the coffin was. Everyone went silent. The sound repeated. Slow. Heavy. Insistent. A cousin swore he saw a shadow pass through the doorway. A woman said she heard footsteps. A man said someone touched his back. The mother took a breath. And then understood. That wake wasn't to say goodbye to the father. It was to welcome something else. When they tried to close the door of the room where the coffin was, they couldn't. Something kept it from shutting. It wasn't the wood. It wasn't the lock. It was as if a force on the other side were pushing back. The candles inside lit themselves. One by one. As if someone invisible had touched each wick. The mother wanted to run. But the older boy stopped her. He looked at her. And with a trembling voice, said, Mom. He wants us to go back. The phrase hit everyone like a hammer. The mother shook her head. No. We will never go back. The boy lowered his head. And said something that made the room feel even smaller. I didn't mean Dad. The silence that followed was unbearable. People started leaving the house. Some praying. Some crying. Some in shock. The mother decided to leave too. She took the kids to the car. She could barely breathe. The air outside felt heavier. As if the same darkness from the wake had spilled into the street. When she finally started the engine, the car lights flickered. And before she could drive, the three of them heard a sound behind them. A knock. In the trunk. Just one. Firm. As if someone, or something, had just climbed in with them. The thump on the trunk made the mother let out a strangled scream. Her hands trembled on the steering wheel. The children looked at each other. Their eyes wide. For a moment, no one said anything. Only the sound of the running engine. And that imaginary echo of the thump repeating in their minds. Over and over. The mother thought about getting out. About opening the trunk. About showing her kids there was nothing there. But something stronger than curiosity kept her hands glued to the steering wheel. A deep instinct. A quiet whisper inside her telling her that if she opened that trunk, she would never be able to close it again. She put the car in motion. She drove away from the house where the wake was held as fast as she could. She didn't look in the rearview mirror. She didn't want to know if someone, or something, was watching them leave from the doorway. During the whole drive, the older boy didn't speak. The girl fell asleep from pure exhaustion. The mother felt like every red light lasted an eternity. And even though the car didn't make any more strange noises, she couldn't stop thinking about the thump. The breathing. The silhouette in the corner. A few weeks later, they moved to another city. It wasn't a plan. It wasn't a dream. It was escape. Pure escape. They sold what little they could. Left behind furniture, clothes, memories. And the house in the countryside was left abandoned for good. But nobody in the town wanted to go near it. Not to claim it. Not to loot it. Not even to look at it out of curiosity. Over time, people began avoiding even mentioning the place. It became a silent stain on the map. A point people only spoke of in whispers. And almost always at night. When someone remembered the wake. The knock from inside the coffin. The silhouette in the corner. The family tried to start over. In the city, nobody knew them. Nobody knew about the house. Nobody knew about the well. The mother found a modest job. The girl slowly adapted. But the older boy didn't. He began spending more time alone. He no longer played with other kids. He no longer laughed. He spoke little. He slept even less. The mother found him many times awake late at night. Sitting on his bed. Staring at the wall. When she asked what he was doing, he always answered the same thing. He's waiting. Who? She insisted. Even though she trembled inside. The boy lifted his gaze. And said, with a calm that was not normal in a child. The same thing that lived in the well. But now it doesn't need the well anymore. The years passed. The girl grew up. Learned how to bury memories. Got used to sleeping with the lights on. To sleeping with music. To making noise so she wouldn't hear the silence. The older boy became an introverted teenager. With permanent dark circles. He drifted off in class. Teachers said he daydreamed. But he knew they weren't dreams. They were warnings. He saw hallways that didn't exist. Doors opening where no doors should be. He heard footsteps behind him. Even when he was alone in his room. And sometimes, in the reflection of the window at night, he saw a silhouette standing a meter behind him. Staring. Faceless. One early morning. While everyone slept. The young man got up. The house was silent. The city outside breathed under its orange streetlights. He walked to the living room. Without turning on any lights. He stood in front of the big mirror next to the door. For a few seconds, he saw only his own face. Tired. Pale. Then, behind him, the darkness in the hallway began to thicken. As if a shadow had decided to occupy the empty space. It didn't move. It didn't approach. It was simply there. He swallowed hard. I know you didn't stay in the house, he whispered. I know you came with us. The air turned cold. His breath came out in small white clouds. A deep breathing filled the room. Slow. Heavy. Far too real to be imagination. He closed his eyes. And said something he had never told anyone. If you want to stay with me. Stay. But leave my mom alone. Leave my sister alone. No one knows exactly what happened that night. All that is known is that, from that moment on, the mother stopped feeling that presence so close. The girl's nightmares became less frequent. The house became just a house again. But the young man, he started changing in a much deeper way. Over time, he drifted away from everyone. Finished school. Got small jobs. And always avoided talking about his past. When someone asked about his childhood, he changed the subject. When he heard stories about haunted houses, he stayed quiet. And if anyone mentioned wells, wakes, shadows, His gaze drifted for a moment, as if he were listening to something others couldn't hear. Years later, he moved out on his own, far from his family. The mother and sister continued their lives, carrying invisible scars. He carried his own. And something else. And this is where I come in. Because this story I'm telling you, I didn't read it anywhere. I didn't make it up. I didn't hear it on the radio. He told it to me. The older boy from that family. Now a grown man. I met him by chance. If chance even exists in these things. We worked at the same place for a while. He never talked much. But one night, when everyone had left and it was only him and me closing up, the conversation took a strange turn. I don't know why. But I ended up telling him that near where I grew up, there was an abandoned house. A house everyone said was cursed. A house nobody wanted to buy. No one wanted to tear it down. He went silent. His expression changed. And he only said one sentence. That house was mine. At first I thought he was joking. But the way he said it, the way his hands trembled, it wasn't the way someone jokes. So I waited. I didn't ask him anything else. I just stayed quiet. He took a deep breath, ran a hand over his face, and began to speak. What followed was this story. With long pauses, uncomfortable silences, with details far too specific to be invented, with a sadness in his eyes that cannot be imitated. He told me about the well, about the footsteps in the hallway, about the wake, the knock on the coffin, the silhouette in the corner, the breathing behind his mother, the thump on the trunk, and the night he stood before the mirror and accepted that whatever it was hadn't left them. It had only chosen whom to follow. When he finished, the night was far along. The place was empty. Only the distant hum of the city could be heard. I didn't know what to say. It wasn't the kind of story you answer with a, "That's scary," or with a nervous laugh. It was something else. The confession of someone who had carried something invisible for far too long. He looked at me and asked, "Have you ever walked past an abandoned house and felt that it's not empty?" The image of the house in my hometown came to my mind. I remembered it perfectly. The peeling facade, the dirty windows, the well at the back of the property, barely visible through the tall grass. I nodded. Slowly. Yes. Many times. He smiled. But it wasn't a happy smile. More like a resigned one. "It's not empty," he said. "It never has been." A few days passed. I couldn't stop thinking about what he told me. Part of me wanted to believe it was just a twisted way to vent. That maybe he exaggerated. But another part, quieter, more instinctive, knew that wasn't true. I decided to do something that maybe wasn't a good idea. I went back to my hometown. I hadn't been there in a while. The excuse was visiting family. The real reason was to see the house. I arrived on a cloudy afternoon. The wind pushed the tree branches. Everything felt the same, yet different. When I walked down the dirt path leading to the house, I felt that knot in my stomach you get when you know you're about to do something you shouldn't. But I kept going. The house was there. Older. More collapsed. Walls stained by rain. Broken windows. A partially sunken roof. And at the back, just as he had described, was the well. Covered by a cracked wooden lid. Surrounded by tall grass. I stayed there for a while, watching from a distance. I didn't want to go in. I didn't want to jump the old rusty wire fence. I was only supposed to look at it, confirm it existed, and leave. But something in me, that mix of curiosity and human stubbornness, pushed me forward. I jumped the fence. The ground cracked under my feet. The air grew colder as I approached the house. Not imagination. A real change. As if I had crossed an invisible line. The front door was slightly open. I pushed it carefully. Inside, it smelled of dust, old wood, humidity, and something else. A dense scent. Sour. Hard to describe. I went in. The floor creaked. The echo of my steps sounded too loud. I looked down the hallway. I thought about the children hearing steps at night. Halfway down the corridor, I felt something strange. Not a noise. Not a thump. It was as if the silence became heavier. As if the air were paying attention to what I was about to do. I could turn around. Leave. Forget everything. Say the house was empty and just stories. But I didn't. I kept going to the patio. There was the well. Closer now. The wooden lid tilted. As if someone had moved it slightly from below. Or from above. I approached until I was less than a meter away. My heart was beating so loudly I could hear it in my ears. The wind seemed to stop. No birds. No insects. Nothing. For a moment, I thought of his father. Of the scream the neighbors heard that afternoon. I thought of the boy standing before the mirror, offering to carry that thing so his family could be left alone. I extended my hand. With 2 fingers. I pushed the lid a little. A heavy smell rose. Cold. Damp. Ancient. It didn't smell like an abandoned place. It smelled like the breath of something that had been there far too long. I leaned in slightly. Not much. Just enough to see darkness. A thick darkness. That refused to show the bottom. And then I heard it. It wasn't a scream. It wasn't a voice. It was breathing. Slow. Deep. Heavy. Exactly as he had described it. I felt my back turn to ice. My whole body reacted before my mind did. I dropped the lid. Stepped back so fast I almost fell. The breathing continued for a moment. Then stopped. As if whatever was down there realized that I now knew it was there. I didn't wait any longer. I almost ran out of the house. Jumped the fence. Didn't look back. When I finally stopped. Far from that property. Only one sentence of his echoed in my mind. We don't always know the hidden story of an abandoned house. But sometimes, discovering it can change everything. Since that day, every time I walk past an empty house, I don't wonder if it's haunted. I don't wonder if someone died there. I only think of the well. The breathing. The silhouette at the wake. The boy who chose to carry something no one else could see. And if you, some night, walk past a dark house, and suddenly feel the air grow colder, the silence become too heavy, your own name feel different inside your thoughts. Don't get closer to understand it. Don't try to peek inside. There are presences that don't need a house to follow you. They only need a glance. A curiosity. A door slightly opened. Even for a moment. And sometimes, all it takes is stopping in front of the wrong place. For something that has been waiting in the darkness for years. To decide that you are the next person it will walk beside.